What's up, guys? Today I am here with Joseph Crowe of Joseph Crowe Designs, and I'm really excited to have him here. This guy, if you're not familiar with him, he actually creates custom horn speakers, and it's pretty darn amazing. So how you doing today, Troy? It's good to have you.
Hi, I'm doing great.
You just do amazing work. I love seeing what you do, and so we're so excited to have you on here. So I just want to give you just some chance to kind of tell us what you do.
Oh, sure. So I'm about 2.5 years into doing this full time. And I started out doing a DIY speaker building blog, and that was 10 years ago. And I was using Blogger. And so I just continued to pump out DIY speaker building blog posts on the various experiments that I was doing in my basement. And I decided that I would do it full time, and I quit my job in the automotive industry as a manufacturing engineering specialist. And as soon as I announced that I was going to be doing custom speaker design and builds, all sorts of people came out of the woodwork and said, "Hey, I got a project for you." And some of it was individuals that were coming forward, and other companies actually were like, we have a project that we're trying to get kicked off, and we need your design support. So yeah, it just kind of hit the ground running because of the attention that the blog had generated. And so that was really nice. And so just to explain, the blog's called Joseph Crowe DIY Speaker Building. And I kept the business name the same as the blog so that people would make the connection. But my name's actually Troy, middle name Joseph.
Yeah, I think that's the most confusing thing. Is it Troy, Joseph, Troy? I guess you probably wouldn't care if someone called you one or the other anyway, right?
Yeah.
But it is just you. It is a one-man show, basically.
Just me. Yeah.
And I think that's the cool thing about what you do is it's very individualized. It's not, you don't have to worry about talking to your manager and someone else's manager and, the manufacturer. You do it all. You have your own CNC that you use, and you design. So like those horns behind you design. And my understanding is they're like a two-part, right? Like there's an A and a B, and then you kind of like glue them together. Is that right?
Usually it's just, usually the horns are made out of one stock block of hardwood, and it usually will involve machining kind of the backside of the horn first, and then flipping it, and then machining the front of the horn. Try to do that as much as possible for quality reasons. The flipping part and making sure that it's completely like perfectly aligned, that's the tricky part. So so pulling from my 3D CAD modeling experience in my previous career, I'm able to design pretty advanced geometry and assemblies to support the type of speakers that I think need to exist.
Yeah. And, I think that's really impressive too, because I don't think a lot of people realize is that based on the geometry of the horn determines, your pattern, of course. And then it also even determines where you can cross over, like the lowest crossover point, etc. Yeah. So now you, I guess, have some type of engineering background where you can actually figure all that out for someone if they had a custom design that they needed.
So I have an equation that is actually, I call it biomimicry. The horn flare geometry is mimicking the logarithmic spiral that you see in nature. And so I figured out what that equation was, and I actually put it right into SolidWorks. And that equation actually drives the horn flare geometry. And so when I started building prototypes using this geometry, I realized, first of all, it measures almost textbook perfect as far as the off-axis polar response. Very low reflections, like it's not introducing any kind of edge diffraction or first or second order reflections. Compared to the horns that I had built up until that point. Like I said, I had the blog for 10 years, and I had made different horns on my wood lathe and different things like that, or bought horns and tested them. But it wasn't until I started playing around with this ES curvature. It's very similar to the Jean-Michel Leclerc flare geometry, but it's kind of my own take on it. I guess you would say it's inspired by that horn profile, in the sense that the horn mouth wraps right around to the back of the horn. So in my latest designs, I've actually included foam on the back side of the horn, so that when that acoustical wavefront wraps around, it gets fully absorbed by the foam.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
a good idea.
yeah, that's something that you can actually measure. It's a measurable difference, and certainly something that's audible. So,
And speaking of measurement, you actually have what we would consider a semi-anechoic chamber where you do all your measurements at, right?
semi, I guess I do gated measurements. I do
No,
it
it's a
outside when I can. Is
no,
that
it's
what
a
you mean?
joke. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
joking because you live out in the country
yeah,
where most people can't, and so
yeah,
you're actually able to get a lot better outdoor measurements than what a lot of people
yeah.
can without the noise.
I'm trying to get as much done as I can, considering it's the summertime. So
Mhm.
lugging everything outside and firing off the sweep tone sweeps, and the birds start making noises, and I'm like, can't you know you're affecting my noise floor? They don't understand, but what can I say?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
darn nature.
yeah, yeah. Don't they care about my sound quality?
They
No,
actually don't. Actually.
no. They sound much better than speakers ever could. But yeah,
Well, and that's the thing too that I love about what you do is, you don't just throw together a product. You actually test a lot of different drivers. You
yeah.
test them within the horns that you make too. So you don't just
Mm.
make a horn and say, okay, this is the horn, throw whatever driver in it as well. You try to match the horn and driver
Oh,
together.
certainly. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not tied to any specific brand. I'm completely willing to experiment with any type of driver technology, whether it's pure ribbon or the pro side on the compression drivers, or just regular dome tweeters. So like right behind me here, that's the SB Acoustics SB29 dome tweeter, which responds really well to horn loading. Other tweeters not so much. So it's everything, as you know, in speaker design, one thing affects the other. That's why I love it so much, is because you have acoustical, mechanical, and electrical, all kind of an interplay between the three, and so I just find it fascinating. Certainly a passion of mine.
Oh, absolutely. And do you mind? Why don't you explain that? Because a lot of people see, just a normal dome tweeter and they think, okay, this is how it goes. You just put the faceplate in, but you can horn load them. So what are like the benefits of doing something like that?
Yeah, so typically a dome tweeter is going to offer extremely wide, almost omnidirectional dispersion pattern near its crossover point. So at around 2 kilohertz, it's very wide, and then it gradually narrows. So by 10 kilohertz, you're down to something like an 80-degree wide listening window. And so what that ends up doing is it creates an uneven power response into your room. And so you're getting a lot more early sidewall reflections in the 2 to 5 kilohertz region. And so what the horn is going to do is it's going to kind of control that coverage pattern in that part of the frequency bandwidth so that it matches the upper treble better. And so if you look at a colored polar map, it's more consistent. And then it also matches up with your low frequency driver, because your low frequency is going to be doing the same thing. This little 5-inch woofer, by about I'd say around 3 kilohertz, it's going to start to narrow. And so you're going to want to match the off axis between the two drivers.
I don't know why, but that speaker just looks bigger to me than a 5-inch driver.
Yeah, that's a little 5-inch.
Oh, is that right directly behind you?
It's yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's like a camera trick.
Bigger?
It seems like it's further back. Yeah. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I actually just noticed the big horn right behind you too.
Yeah, this actually is it's a 300 hertz cutoff horn. It's a biradial solid walnut, and then above it would be a 1200 hertz horn. So you kind of see the difference. The size difference between horns is proportional. So it's just physics, right? So that's the other limitation with horns, is they're big. They have to be, and so a lot of people they can't accommodate them in their home. But the benefits are certainly there. And continuing on to answer your question, the SB Acoustics on its own without the horn, it suffers distortion as soon as you try to start to go below 2 kilohertz, simply because the driver is working too hard to produce the sound. However, when you horn load it, you're actually gaining 9 dB of sensitivity. And so you're actually able to attenuate down the tweeter in that region. And so the tweeter doesn't have to work nearly as hard to produce the same output. And so what it does is it allows you to cross the tweeter even lower. So on these speakers, the crossover point is actually 1.2 kilohertz, where otherwise it would be impossible.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the great things about I think horns in general, assuming they're designed correctly by someone like you, Troy.
That's the huge caveat. There's so many pitfalls along the way, right? So the horn flare geometry needs to be extremely smooth, extremely precise, and if it's not, then it's just going to introduce reflections, and especially in the horn throat, deep down inside where the driver is, any inconsistencies or issues with the sound is obviously going to be amplified, right? So that 9 dB that I spoke about earlier, that's going to be amplified by 9 dB. So if there's a reflection in that throat, it's going to be unlistenable. And so that's often what you hear with the stigma associated with horn speakers is an improperly designed horn.
So interesting that you say that, because I was just going to actually comment on that. I was going to say a lot of people actually say they don't like horns because of the certain sound signature that it gives them.
Yeah.
But it sounds like what you're saying is, a lot of times when you listen to that, that's just an improperly designed horn.
Exactly. Yeah. So if the sound coming out of the horn comes to the edge of the mouth of the horn, and there's an abrupt physical transition, the sound is simply going to reflect back down the horn, which is a first order reflection. And our ears are extremely sensitive to first order reflections. It's just a repeating of the sound, and it's a blurring of transients. And there's certainly design elements that need to be optimized.
So I have to ask, because I'm sure everyone is asking this, why horns? I mean, you could have went anyway, but you went directly to horns, and you're great at it.
So what I find is, in the past 50 years, there's been a lot of research on horn technology and product development in the pro sector, where you still have horns being used to provide even coverage throughout the venue, for like a live show. And so typically with the advent of constant directivity, it is providing a nice even coverage. But with constant directivity, you're sacrificing the low reflection aspects to what I mentioned earlier. So constant directivity is going to have a very narrow throat, and then it's all of a sudden going to angle out almost instantly to the coverage pattern, which would be, for example, 90 degrees listening window. But that abrupt change in the geometry is going to introduce reflections, and you can easily measure that, and it's certainly audible. And so the alternative to constant directivity is the exponential horn, which is all my horns are exponential. And so it's offering a very smooth horn flare geometry, and it's a low reflection design. The reason exponential isn't used in the pro audio world is simply because it doesn't provide an even coverage, in the sense that it's the same at 10 kilohertz as it is at 1 kilohertz. So my horns do have a gradual narrowing of coverage towards the upper treble, but this is still like, so for example, this speaker here, it still offers the same coverage as a regular dome tweeter. It's a 90 degrees listening window at 10 kilohertz. So it wouldn't be suitable for pro audio, but it's certainly suitable for home listening. And so historically, there hasn't been a lot of development with horn technology for home use. And so it's kind of, to me, low-hanging fruit in the sense that there's a lot of opportunity to develop horn technology for home audio applications. And so that's what I've done.
And I think that's great too, because it's, first of all, everyone sees your work behind you. It's all beautiful hardwood. It looks like the one on your left with the 5 inches looks like walnut. I don't know what the small one is, but it's whatever that one is, beautiful.
Yeah, that one. That's
that
cherry.
one.
Yeah, solid cherry. Predominantly, my customers want walnut. It's very popular.
Yeah, and I guess you can get that where you're at.
Just this morning, I went to my local sawmill and loaded up my truck with walnut. It was like an hour of hand picking the right boards and looking at the wood grain and figuring out what were good pieces. I took probably half of what was in the pile, kind of just sorting through.
And that's one of the things I don't think a lot of people think about, because, I mean, that's another aspect of it, because what you're doing isn't just, acoustics, it's also art.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Yeah. And I'm going to mention too, for anyone that hasn't seen everything that Troy has done, he is on Instagram as well under, it's Joseph Crowe Designs, right? On Instagram.
Instagram is Joseph Crowe DIY.
Oh, Joseph Crowe DIY.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at them. They're gorgeous. I was showing someone the other day, actually, what you were doing, and they're like, oh my goodness, it's amazing. And so you do this both commercially now for businesses and individually as well. If someone wants it and has enough money, you'll also design something for them as well.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the value proposition here is that if you compare my services to simply buying something off the shelf, I don't have the overhead like the larger companies, but what I do offer is the customization. So everything that I do is built to order. So I work with the customer, and usually I'll do up a proposal and include pictures or an assembly drawing with a detailed project scope, and it's quoted up front and put as a kind of like a custom product on my website. And it just really makes the customer feel comfortable that they know exactly what they're getting. And so,
yeah. And I really like too, because you do run a YouTube channel as well. And I'll make sure to link that down. And you show some of your tests going on, which is really neat and fascinating, I think.
So I focus tremendously on the objective measurement side. Not that I don't listen to my products. That's kind of like the last leg in the development, is the critical listening. But I do a lot of YouTube videos just to support the hobby, the DIY hobby, because it's my roots, right? I've been doing it ever since high school. So,
well, and it's pretty interesting too, because when we're talking about this, we're talking about, you said there's not a lot of people that really do horns and, in your home environment. And I think really the one that most people will know is Klipsch. And I think Klipsch by itself has a stigma that you either really love them or really hate them. And I think maybe that goes back to some design choices that they've done in the past. But you're right. I don't think there's not a lot of home manufacturers that I can think of that design those. But the people that really love them, like Klipsch Scalas, for example, people love those.
Yeah. I think more and more there's more products coming out that at least offer a waveguide on the tweeter. And so I think if I was to predict, there's going to be more products that are just basically horn loading, because I feel like the waveguide is almost there in terms of the benefits. It's providing some increase in sensitivity, like I mentioned earlier, but to fully load a horn, like to fully horn load a driver, you're going to fully realize the benefits that it has to offer in terms of like low distortion. So I think there'll be a trend towards just a proper horn speaker.
So Troy, I'm assuming that there's going to be quite a bit of challenges when designing these. Are there any challenges that you've had to come across with some of your own designs?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, horn speakers have to be quite large. And so the issue of integrating the various horns in a package that maintains the coherency, right? So if the drivers are physically separated, your mid and your treble, then that's going to create some challenges. And so I've created what I call the Nighthawk, and it's a solution that I've come up with where the drivers are very close center to center spacing, and it provides kind of it's not co-entrant because each horn does have its own horn throat, but it's allowing the drivers to be closely centered, and it's a unique design. Usually when you try to do a co-entrant design, you end up with one giant horn. And so I find when you have one giant horn, it's difficult to get wide coverage in the upper treble. So there's no way around it. A small horn produces a wide coverage. And so with the Nighthawk, it offers a small horn in the middle, and then it's flanked by two mid-range drivers, top and bottom, and a larger horn. So it's like an hourglass shape. And so I've already built and tested, like I would call Rev 1, and had some learning lessons from that. It was the best sound that I was able to achieve so far. It wasn't without its issues. I call them issues. I simply didn't meet the optimum performance in terms of off axis that I was looking for. And so I'm now building Rev 2, and I'll have some tests to show shortly on that. They're about half complete.
It's kind of funny that you say that. I was listening to an interview with Andrew Jones, who's also a popular speaker designer for those who don't know.
Yeah.
And they asked him, they said, Andrew, when are you finished with your speaker design? And he goes, when someone tells me I have to be.
Oh, no. Yeah.
You know, and I think you understand that too. There's a certain point where I'm sure you could, you know, be tweaking and working on something for the rest of your life if you really just wanted to get that extra 0.1% back out of it.
Yeah.
You know, and most people will never see that, but you know, I understand what you're talking about. There's that little bit where you're like, man, I wish I could get that. Well, Troy, I really appreciate you coming on here with me and sharing that. We're going to make sure to put all of your business details and websites down in the description for anyone that hasn't seen it. I'll also link it as a comment as well, guys. So make sure that you check out Troy's stuff.
Thank you. Take care.
Oh, thanks, Troy. Have a great day.